Some are crickets, and some are not. Which one are you? Doesn't matter how much you know. It doesn't matter what you think you can do, what you believe, what you call yourself, what you call the other guy. It's what you do that's proper against the things that you don't like around you, and you make them right, that's going to matter. However that works. It's how you respond to that which has been built up around you that harms you is what matters. Yeah, ducking and running and hiding and pretending you're all Mr. Miss Free in the world. Yeah, I guess that could be used as an excuse. There's an avoidance there, and there's an evasion, isn't there? There's an avoidance that you avoid the harm, which is probably pragmatically smart, maybe even an intelligent move. But it then turns around and becomes an evasion of all of our duty to have stopped the nonsense, arrest the nonsense and crime against us. And so this is what I do, try to do. That principle alone, I think, is the resounding message I try to bring behind the woodshed. In all the ways and all the hours I put in and all the discussion, however, good or bad, I've communicated that. And with little help from y'all, I have to say. I've been doing what I can as I understand, and as I daily apply the things I tell you during the weekend here, as I apply it with and help people apply what I'm talking about, I try to refine how to communicate it to y'all who may be interested in these things that we just weren't told about. So at one level, I certainly don't have a judgment until you start to hear it, and then you don't really respond correctly. And then I start wondering about us. I even throw myself in there because I'm not perfect. I want to drag my feet too sometimes. And I don't have a war mentality in my mind. I've never been in the field of battle, but somehow that's what sneaks up really quick behind me and says, but you're in a field of battle. It doesn't look like it, and there's someone sneaking up on you. You go to sleep, you don't do the right thing, you don't figure out the next tactic that's going to be used against you. It's over. And it is. It really is in large part. And so, what are we going to do about what the problem is? I did appreciate, I'd listened before the broadcast on UCY.tv and Ron Stevens' program Game On, and listened to Murray. Very interesting. The guy, he's being honest, but I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him. Not that I'd want to throw him, but you understand what I'm saying. And he was doing the avoidance thing. And as a critique, if Ron is listening or will listen or someone can get the message, you have to know about process to go after what he was trying to do. What he was doing was combining up the system as a normalcy, impliedly putting the Bar Association as a transparency in that, and getting you to discuss it. When in fact you have to divide what the common law, if you will, is, what you think it might be, at least how it applies in the regard of what was there before us, before the bar, and to separate that out with what their occupying forces have thrown on all other parts of the world that are under rule of law and democracy. Now you're going to have a segment that, if he is truly honest, and he knows a little bit there, he was doing the avoidance thing, if you're truly honest, he would listen and he would go learn for some things. Really, you need to set up a foundation of the discussion, and then you might be able to get somewhere. We found that when you do that, you very quickly find out if you have someone that's really a criminal versus someone who was just honestly in the profession and didn't understand some of these things. We talk with a number of attorneys, but they happen to be all very old attorneys who are disgusted with what has happened since they've been involved with the legal profession, even so. What they thought was an honorable thing, as they promote it's honorable. So there are people, and I've learned not to judge, but there are people that are honestly disgusted with that legal system, and it doesn't do what we thought it was, and then they start finding out that it really was never set up. It was getting you to go along with the absurdities that they brought on as they plunder across the work. And so I'm not going to critique the conversation more than to say the way the answer, what was going on, and the way we have to answer, usually it's all the attorneys. You have to divide what is supposed to be with what they've thrown over the top and try to cover as normal. And you can't get into common law discussions like someone thieving some from someone else. That's not the argument you want to get into. You got to get into the systemic problems. And as a reference, if you've ever heard Ron Stevens talk about his friend, the farmer and the milk producer, that would be where to go. You go to the place that the law of the land is the raw materials production, and how the Bar Association, the rule of law and democracy, is hell-bent to destroy that, and it's in their own documentation, and you have that available to present to them. And so I don't want to critique that any further. I do see this as a problem. We get stuck in minutia that someone else starts to guide the conversation, and you get away really quickly from talking about really the question in my mind was, where would the attorney explain what the people would do in a system that was controlled completely by a professional trade union, in the making of the law, the suggesting of the law, the making of the law, the enacting of the law, the oversight of the law, and the enforcement of the law. What are people to do? And that wouldn't be the sole question, but I mean, it's a different question to go into a question where someone in the profession is attempting to avoid the liability of the members. He's either knowing he's doing it and he's a criminal, or he's honestly in there and didn't understand it. He's one of these guys that just is completely, they just don't, they are embarrassed by where the system has gone. And at that point, then you might have someone that we can deal with and help, and we find a few of those here and there. But they all seem to be very old. It's very interesting. The new ones are just kind of go along, and they go along with what they're told, and yes, you then have that problem. When does that system, when do they and they have their own sense of conscience, and they look at, well, maybe that was just not right. See, they justify their elitism in this as well. You have to separate this out. This is why mining law for us in the United States of America, which also granted, it's a grant of water as well, and also gives us patent and gives us how the title works and what the separation between the government and the obligations and duties of government that don't exist in about anywhere else that I've been able to find, create the chasm by which the bar cannot trespass, and they do all the time, which identifies their criminality. You don't blame any individual member, but you do identify what the problem is. And so just if those of you that heard it don't, and I hope I said enough self-contained in this discussion on how you go about discussing with someone who is part of that system, whether they understand it or not, whether they are a harm, and how you get at the discussion. You don't get at the event by event. You go after the systemic control that defeats you in something. You have to articulate something in you that's been harmed by that system, and how there's no remedy because of the system. And this is what I've been trying to suggest to you, what we've been doing in the way we approach this, is we identify the lack of remedy. One of the things about the occupier is that's one of the other things that befalls us when we just don't en masse throw off the occupier. You have to show that there was nothing else you could do. That's why the Second Amendment is kind of out there for me. It's the last resort, and there's no guarantee on that. That means you're just in you're in an ignoble occupier, not even going to recognize anything, which it sounds like to me that they might be. But you don't presume that on anybody. Again, you got to hold that innocence until proven guilty, whether or not they do. So we have a long way to go before we get to that Second Amendment. And as I wrote years and years ago, you're going to have a bunch of drunken fools that are going to be thinking that their Second Amendment right should be exercised once they get once they start seeing the problem is right in front of their face. And my question is, why didn't you see it before? And you're going to act the drunken fool to respond that way, and that's not the way we want to go into the future, if there is one that we have any control over, which we were to control. So we got lots of stuff that, again, we have to rethink what we were doing. And I want to touch something from last week. And thank you very much for those of you that did some research. And again, there's a comment from Vin Z, I think it is, on the Vlogcaster page. I think Vin Z went and did some research and went and tracked down what subject matter jurisdiction was, if I remember this right. Thank you for doing that for yourself and for me, letting me know that you're on to this and wanted to see it. Now, I don't know what all you found. From the documentation links that you provided, I think you pretty much saw what I was saying. And there's a whole lot of interesting things to be looked at inside that, those documents. And I'll just extend a thank you that by going through one of your links, I was able to get to another document from one of these law companies, these very integrated rule policy making households, of how they look at things. And it gives me, I got another document beyond subject matter jurisdiction to explain what the rules are going to be when we go to the next phase. So we can work together by our independent study. And I can't appreciate enough the independent study. And Vince, thank you. The subject matter jurisdiction position, though, I wanted to caution everybody, because this is the gun that I put in your hand as a little kid, and you didn't shoot the cat if you're not paying close attention. You have to understand when the position I was taking with you and the position my friend made with the officer arresting him on a granted right. We're not talking about the right to drive. We're talking about a granted right of access and ingress and egress that you have to find in your own state laws is there. You are going to not just use a question, what's your subject matter jurisdiction, as a shield. You're using it to identify to the officer, the point of first contact, that you have a separate reality from the one he's been trained in, that he has no right to transgress. If you don't have that separate reality understood, what I'm telling you is going to get you in a lot of trouble. That's not to back you off. That's to say it's there, but there's a way to execute that part. If you don't offer the alternate reality that you have right to do against what they believe they've defamed you or mischaracterized you or coerced you into you or taken away from you by theft, by extortion under color of authority, if you don't have the other thing that you have right to do, you will lose this what I just told you from last week about bringing the subject matter jurisdiction question. The subject matter jurisdiction question comes up because there are many, and they are only focusing. I just used the habit of the beast. They're focused always on one thing, and they're blinded to it. So there's an education process. So don't think because you say what's your subject matter jurisdiction, that's the end all be all. No, you'll probably get beat up, beat down, and put in jail. The point is, that's the point of the harm that now you have, that they were never supposed to trespass, and that is where you start going after them. Now, if they're smart, see, they're under discretion. Now you go after the respondent superior aspect. If they're smart with discretion and they violate you, now that's the state certification. That's how you go after the state under respondent superior. And you take away the immunity of the state on their obligations and duties that you have found elsewhere, like your granted right to use the highway, not to drive, not to travel, but to use the ingress and egress. To where? To the other properties granted, and the evidence of which are in patents and or other devices, depending on the state you're in. They might be a state certificate of patent or state certificate of conveyance of some sort. You have to go, each state's kind of a little bit different. So there's a power in the separation of the states. There's also a weakness in that you have to go to each state. You see the weakness is apparent in the gun laws, so-called. That's a weakness because of the different jurisdictions, that they all should be under the same, and they're not. It should tell you something. But also the uniformity is something you can bring against each one of them as well. So you have to know this thing a lot better than just listening to me, and I didn't want to have anybody go. I wanted to give a little bit of space and time before I gave that warning. If you go subject matter jurisdiction, you'll turn the subject matter jurisdiction question right into am I free to leave condition that'll be useless to you and a danger and set you up for problems if you don't understand it. And so the answer to that is, if you use what's your subject matter jurisdiction against an officer, and we're talking about what typically is understood as a traffic violation, and you understand your road use laws, the highway laws, not the motor vehicle code, but the highway use laws, and you understand the source of the grants and the authority and the obligations and duties, you know how and have and can speak to an alternative reality that is not within the constraints of the state to interfere with. And when they do, they not only violate the intent of Congress, they violate the property conveyed to the people as a usufruct. They also violate the express and implied contract in the grant and impair that contract. Now you have another constitutional violation they're not supposed to do. And so it rolls out pretty quick, but you can't walk and do not use what I tell you as a silver bullet. You have to know a whole lot more. That's what scares me about what I do here and talking to you about stuff. These people are criminals. You have to understand that you're walking into that. Now, when hopefully some of you understand what I've been saying, and maybe you're taking the time to learn how to go about going after the state while you have your licenses and while you're under the servitude to go question the legitimacy of that in the alternate reality of the other granted right to access. What did I just say? Well, you find in your highway law the right that the government does not have to interfere with the underlying right to use the highway. That's your grant. If there's no right to interfere with the underlying right, how do they have the right to interfere? Well, they don't. So you have to get that worked out. Why? Because you live under a decades and decades long imposition of an organized criminal syndicate. It's not my decision. That's not my plan. That's not what I wanted. But I lived through it just the same. And so I did want to address that in part because a couple of you sent me some stuff, and I want to feed into that your investment back for yourself in looking at what I said. I didn't get any contrary views, so I suspect that you agreed with what my basic position was on the interpretation of what a subject matter jurisdiction condition is and why, but I didn't throw in that little extra that I want those of you that are moving your studies along to understand. Given, and we apply it to the subject matter of the use of the highways, you have this over-regulated, over-top regulation of commerce, and that is not supposed to interfere with the underlying right of the use of the highway. Find that statute, that acceptance, and if it's not in your acceptance in the statutes as acknowledgments, you have to go find the enactments that said so. They're there. This is one of the things that I tell you, they get rid of your memory about what your rights are, and you come along thinking everything's a regulation authority. In fact, that regulation authority violates the law at multiple levels. Fiduciaries, trust, trust relationships, and just a whole lot of stuff. So, I'm just pausing. I want that to settle a little bit. Thank you again. Just a couple of you it's a thrill. But again, learning this stuff correctly and then engaging on your particular subject matter is the key. You come by a form type position and you'll be defeated. You come by your own actual cause. Not only do you have the passion that you're being violated, or you see a violation in someone else you want to see arrested or stopped or whatever you want to determine it, you come with your own weaponry, your own skill set that they just can't keep up with us. That's experiential, folks. I'm telling you that from experience. They just can't keep up with us. There's only a few that I work with, and they just can't keep up with us. Our reach is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's just underneath the skin of it all. No, the system is so well entrenched. It's not so easy, and I don't know that we want to make ourselves known. I told you I'm not promoting. I'm not a promoter. I've found they go after people for promotion. I mean, you just look at what the IRS does. They'll tell you what not to do. Don't promote, don't sell, don't get yourself entangled with all that. Figure out the other way. And I found the other way is finding the laws that exist, these substantial things in the law of the land itself. The land itself is where the source of this authority comes from, that the governments, either one, federal or state, and their political subdivisions or agencies or, as I say, employees, whatever entity they use, cannot touch these things. That they do is the crime. That they do repeatedly is their persistence in committing crime. That establishes policy and custom, which is what you're after when you're going after a respondent superior or, if you will, civil rights lawsuit. That the state, despite its obligations and duties to protect your right to use the highway acknowledged by this statute, is to defeat that in you at every turn by these mechanisms. And you can list them, whether it's the bar association or the court system that's independent but not recognizing the law, or just an agency imposition, or the cops not listening to what they're supposed to be doing. Their certification that allows the failure in the certification to allow them to know they're not supposed to touch you, that when you have a certain notice on your vehicle, that you call this a vehicle, I use that word loosely, but they're supposed to know the distinction. You have to know about that. Not that they'll recognize it, because they won't right now. So, Subject matter jurisdiction is all critical. One thing that pops in my mind right off the top of the issue, top of the documentation I quickly read through a lot of, but the first one was, it is what gets you into the court, isn't it? And they established that at the first point of the meeting. They gave them probable cause to believe that a court could have jurisdiction. The question of subject matter jurisdiction knocks that into a question that they have to resolve because the state has the burden, doesn't it? We're talking some legal technicalities here, but they're not blown away. I mean, it's not some beyond the thought. The state, the plaintiff, always, the people who make the complaint always have the burden of invoking a jurisdiction. And just a subtle error that I found, a little thing that went through, someone was saying that the court required the prosecutor to make jurisdiction. That's not how it works. The court's supposed to find it in the pleadings. He's not supposed to beg the complainant to go put it. They may give the plaintiff, the complainer, the right to amend the complaint if it doesn't appear on the record in the complaint to give the court jurisdiction, but they don't beg the prosecutor to produce it. That's a dismissal right there on its face. That's also the court kind of not being independent anymore, is it? No, the parties are to come to the court with their rights, not the weakness of the other. And we tend to work on the weaknesses as a people because that's the way we've been told. We're victimized. Somehow I got out of that victimization side. It's not that I'm not susceptible. I'm just saying in this subject matter area, I think I've learned a thing or two. I got my lessons here behind the woodshed, and I think I'm applying them as best as they can be applied, and the results, I think, speak for themselves, despite the fact that none of them are a silver bullet. And so when I look out and I see all these things going on, and I see the people talking about a lot of stuff, about how much they want to know. It's not about what you know. It's about what do you know that you do with. What do you do with all that knowing? And I listened prior to this broadcast on UCY. We got Corbett Report. He talks about a lot of people do lots of research. They want to know where things were. But I started to think about: do you want to know what happened? Do you want your rear view mirror, a bigger rear view mirror than you do a view looking forward? Or do you always want to look at history and understand how that happened to you? Or do you want to look forward and anticipate that they did it back then? That's good enough to us. Now let's look forward to see how they're doing it again to us and stop it. Let's drive around the nonsense, or maybe drive over that nonsense. Let's run it into make them the deer in the headlights, and if it's some chupacabra, we run it down and we make it roadkill. How about that? Why are we looking in the back? Why are we studying so much of our history when there's on certain little specific issues, and not using that immediately to turn forward and go after what they're doing, using all that in those techniques? They're using that against us now. I don't understand why we do that. Why is there more interest in the past and all the people that listen to other people on the internet talking about things than there is taking these lessons that we've learned and immediately turning forward and say, they're doing it again here, let's arrest it? That's just an open question, because I stopped looking. When I figured out for myself, what I thought I saw was happening, I turned around immediately from history, turned right around and said, oh, we're right in it right now, and this is where they're going with that, the same way they did it to us before, or next iteration, the next development, the next modification, the next alteration that caused them to go. How are they even doing that? What's the consciousness, the together, timeless consciousness that's allowing this? And I've developed from looking at all that. Instead of looking at history all the time, yeah, I did look at that. I did do some of that study. But at some point, I realized it was a waste of time. At some point, you do know enough. You know enough to stop a harm today. What I'm trying to bring to you, it's just not today. It's been happening. It's going to happen until we take away their so-called infrastructure that they're so proud to build, their capacity building. The capacity to create more brokers and middlemen inside, taxing and parasitically eating from your life. The Bar Association is a major one. The rest come from those so-called statutes and rules that have been developed to allow the next group to come up underneath. So how do you stop it? How do you stop an occupation? Well, there's a couple of ways. So there's not really a good answer to that. I'm offering one way. I'm offering a way short of having to go with the Second Amendment because I don't think we're a capable people. I think we're a bunch of drunken fools. I wrote about this. Oh gosh, I can't remember now. It's going to be 20 years here in a few more years that I wrote about this very problem. If we haven't seen the problem by the time we got here to throw the occupiers out using the Second Amendment without a question and an excuse, I don't think we have the insight enough to start now. And in fact, the more I thought about it, I said, when we go there, we've really lost it ourselves. We failed ourselves. It isn't magic what happened. It's kind of magical in a way that we could be so stupid to allow it, but that's neither here nor there once you start to understand what it is. I don't have to call out the names. They'll give it any name they want. The problem is, what's the cause and effect? When something, whatever name they and who they are, they come along and they do something, what's its result? If that result is to diminish somebody, they need to be gone. It's pretty simple. And for me, and I keep reminding you of this because it was so clarifying for me, the law of the land by grants and disposal acts really makes the bright line. I don't have, those are written, everything's written about those. There's no opinion needed about it. There's not a give and take about it all. We cut to the core. Like, this ongoing thing, and when I move on, now I'll get onto my tabs. Now, it's only, a half an hour now, I get onto the point. But I think it was touching base with last week with a couple of you who did respond to me, and I hope that those that didn't or find that you're still restudying, you follow up on what I'm saying, and you're starting to see what I'm saying, and I assume that's what's going on because you're not showing me an alternative view, maybe an error I've made, that I want to tie this stuff together for you as we move along. Because it's serious what we're doing, and we don't need to get ourselves in trouble. We definitely have to have better than an internet knowledge and application. I don't know what else to say than I think I'm one of the few on all of the internet that can do that in the subject matter areas that I'm speaking to. And so we want to cut to the chase, and so we don't waste a lot of time. This is why, for me, I will get onto my tabs. The Benghazi question, I said, don't forget Benghazi. Don't be persuaded. We talked last week. I'm going to bring this up now from last week again as well. We have the point where we see this colonel, or was it the week before? I don't know. I just lose time. But anyway, there's a guy that's coming out, and I said, be careful what he's pointing out as a red herring. We got to focus on who made the decisions that provided for the interference pattern. And it was Obama. He was the one is the only one that could make these decisions. Now, they threw in the red herring that expanded that decision base to the State Department, but you're still looking at two felons and treasonous individuals. It doesn't matter. But really, it's only stuck to one, the unqualified one, the UN qualified one. Think about what I've been saying here, folks, and the connections. It seems so true to me. The White House refuses Benghazi questions for Obama. They come in and say, well, there's a separation of powers question problem in all this. And I'm always interested to find out what questions are they asking. Why don't they do a show cause instead? Why are they asking questions? Why don't they take a position in law and say, show cause how this law wasn't working on you, the failure of which is a crime, whether it be misdemeanor, felony, treason, or worse, if there's worse. So I see that our governments are playing together, if you will, but this is an ongoing thread. You think that White House refuses now? Okay, they're going to build some contentions. I'm almost positive this would come from the Republican sector or maybe the neocon sector or whatever. It's just a nonsense behind the scenes we'll never really understand. I don't have the time to go look. But they'll think that though the White House is not answering and they're going to bring this thing up. But you notice that the House Select Committee is failing miserably as well. I want you to see that. Why I look at some of this really is just what I just said. What question would I ask relative to law, or what action would I take? What's my remedy for this abstraction that's been made? And it refines what I would focus on. Now, that may not be correct in my first analysis. I may have to adjust it, but I'm at least getting what I think is my mind in the proper frame to look and bore down into what the subject matter requirements are. And that relates over, if I can never do anything with Benghazi, even though this is all a reflection of what they're doing in the United States, even if I can't even see that, if I understand that these people are, these costumes of entities are creating red herrings no matter what they do, my refining what their problems are allows me to refine my presence, my presentation, and my action and offenses and defenses in the world for the wrongs that are local to me. If you want to respond this is a fractal. I think it can be viewed that way. A mirror reflection over there to here, as contorted as it might look, as carnival mirrorish it can be, is there to be cognized. I don't even know how to describe it for everybody so that the anecdotes are sufficient to cover the listenership. I could go on and on with this stuff. We just have to even cut through that. Anyway, so that's why I even bring this stuff up. I don't know what to do about Benghazi. It's just they're doing it, folks. You're seeing the evidence of the crime. So now how do we bore down? How do we look through all this authorita? And we do it as an exercise for those things that are outside of our reach so that we can turn that and focus and become the laser of shock and awe where we are. So, just want to, broadcaster will have this report. They're going to throw this all together, say, oh, there's going to make this analogies of they'll recognize the Constitution. They've thrown down the Constitution, but the White House is going to bring up a constitutional separation of powers. Folks, this White House went extrajudicial. They did this in the Bush House. This is not about Republicans, Democrats, or even anybody in the office. This thing has gone bad. It went bad a long time ago, and the people have been crickets to it. So don't get all partisan on me about what I'm talking about with Obama or Bush or any of these. Remember, we sued both political parties, and we found them. They found themselves wanting by failure to respond. It's a default judgment against them. What the essence of the injunction of our case, Jefferson Mining District versus Kitzhaber in 2013, said was that if you defaulted there on the subject matter, you're committing felonies and treason. So I'm not partisan on all this. In fact, what we do in production is not supposed to be touched by politics, whether the many-faced, blood-sucking kind or not. Remember, I've correlated to you politics with police and commerce. Okay, it's all that. Commerce is not supposed to touch production. The producers, the raw material producers, have right from farm to market, from mine to market. Market, in the first instance, is not commerce. You have a right to get from your labor what you were granted to go do. There's no commerce regulation about that. Well, how they've encroached for the farmer is on the police power side, for the health, safety, welfare, morals, etc. Nauseum. Nonsense. Which is, in some regard, is not so nonsense, actually, when you look at it. But you have to answer that, for the farmer has to answer that side, or that a miner doesn't have to answer. But farm, from producer to market, is within the grant. How else would someone make their livelihood than to bring it to someone as an end user or a wholesaler? It's not in commerce at that point. Farm to market high roads are different than the rails. This is all in case law if you want to go there, and some of it's important stuff to read. You got to be very clear on how you read it, though. But for a minerals producer, the coal is owned by the property owner who owns the coal. The mineral right is owned by possession. It's possessed by the coal operator. The coal owner. It's the possessor of it. Whether or not he uses an operator to extract it is a different point. But even so, that's not in commerce. For rail, it gets into commerce once it touches a rail car. Once it's loaded into a rail car, it's in commerce there, but not the liability of the raw materials producer. Once you start to understand this distinction and this separation and this chasm, you start realizing what system you're actually been thrown into. And none of us have understood, well, not many, have understood how to create the fact of that separate reality, where the term the concept of subject matter jurisdiction does that immediately. If the cops were honest and everyone was honest so far on these things, let's say, of travel and what you call trafficking, they'd know that the subject matter authority is commerce. Well, you have to have the alternate reality in that. So when they said, if they were honest, they said, well, I'm here for commerce. Well, you have been mistaken. The placard you saw does not say I'm in commerce. It identifies to you at a distance that I'm in a granted use, that you have no authority to impair, infringe, adulterate, mistake, mischaracterize, etc., and so forth. So you have your existence and your rights that you all think you have. You all talk about how you have them, but you don't even know what they are, actually. You talk about them, but you don't even know where they're at. And they're there, which is really astonishing to me. I have to give over to those that actually did it right in the government, that it was the repository for the objective basis. Now, that's been adulterated so that it's not so clear anymore, but when you go back and you realize the relation back doctrine, that these grants, the date of enforcement for your rights, is of the date that the grant existed, back when, you realize it cuts through all this current nonsense. And so subject matter jurisdiction is not a silver bullet. If you say it in the wrong place and you're doing something that brings you in, then you're going to use it the wrong way. You ask that question, it'll be just like asking, am I detained? And he say, yeah. You ask that question, he says commerce, and then he has a body of evidence around why he thinks you're doing commerce. You're in that court system. You're not going to get out. You're going to have the next set of avoidances that you bring on. But we're in a day that these people don't understand any of this, that it's pretty cut and dried, that they're probably going to violate you. So you got to get ready for that. We try not to. The road thing is a different one because there's not a whole easy way to sneak into that. It's not like dealing with a federal agency where they send you a letter first of notice of an infraction. That's what they should do on the street. That's actually due process. That would, as I think about it, that would really be the due process. They should send you a letter of inquiry as to your purpose on the road, given the set of facts an officer witnessed at his discretion. Take away that discretion and make it more of a requirement to make an inquiry. And as I think about it, what's the answer to all of our problems is given to us. We make the law, folks. Remember, we don't hand it over to the legislature. Why doesn't someone just take what I just said, think about it, if it's proper, now apply it in your state? Say, make a law, not a referendum, that would come from the legislature, an initiative that states just what I just said. That the legal due process is failed at the point of ostensibly what traffic issues, but before there's a court appearance required, there has to be a complaint, a notice, an opportunity to respond to an allegation of the use of the highways for commerce. I think maybe I just identified, I hadn't thought about it before, it just came out. Now I'm kind of wondering about it myself. Maybe I've just found the little linchpin that we aren't provided due process actually in the face of a presumptive government, where they presume you in their jurisdiction just because you're within the constraints of a fictional borderline. And that's not the truth either, but I'm not going to, I can't talk about everything of this. It's all wrong. I just pointed out to you, let you think about it. What was one of the answers I told you a long time ago? Create your own legislation. The power's in the people. Why, when we see a problem, don't we make the legislation and push it through as the people's will? Contrary to everything else. And be very careful. Be very fastidious about how you bring that forward, so you're not doing things like making two subject matters. You're not making an extension. You're not talking out of your opinion. It takes a little bit of work. It's not that hard. The hardest part is being more familiar with what we were never supposed to not know. We were supposed to know this stuff. We don't necessarily needed to know the lawyer-imposed stuff, but that would have been an easy thing to kill, wouldn't it? If we had known that we were only supposed to know a little bit about things, small things, and they went beyond that, we'd have been all over them, wouldn't we? And when we weren't, they took the license they told us they were going to take. One thing, I want to move on now. So Benghazi gives us a reflection that we can do. Look at the the unqualified one. He's the one. The White House is now saying, oh, they don't have to answer, and they're using a constitution that they've thrown down, and the Congress doesn't say anything. They're crickets too to this overthrow of the will of the people through the representation. Where is everybody here? But here's a urgent thing. It has been going on, and it's become really serious, I suppose, now, because now it's the first. Now they're using the word urgent in the headlines. I did want to tell you all about this. For those of you that don't have a Honda, don't worry about it. But those of you that do or know of somebody, urgent airbag danger for 313,000 Honda owners. This is the airbag problem. We talked about it, the Takata airbags that I talked about a long time ago. It's really become a real problem. The real problem is that the danger is the chemicals they use to do the expansion gas deteriorates and becomes explosive, literally, and it makes shrapnel out of your device. So I want to at least be on that record to tell you, because I can't imagine what that would be to get your airbag blowing up in your face, or someone you love, or a passenger, or whatever. So look around, care enough for people if you see a Honda, maybe even to, I can't remember now, but get the blogcaster. I don't go through much of this. You should find out what this is. Identify what cars they are the Honda makes. They're actually not just Honda. It's lots of them. In fact, here they are, Honda Civics, Accords, 2002 to 2003, 2002 Honda Odyssey, CRVs, 2003 Acuras, Pilots, looks like 2002 to 2003. There's also recalling 2008 to 2011 cars. If you see someone with a Honda, ask them to be careful with their airbags. There's a recall, have them check it in. This is really, talk about a surprise in your face. This is the one they're telling everybody to don't drive anymore, but just to drive it down to the dealer, because the deterioration of the chemicals used is such that it's explosive just by sitting around. And in southern states, it's worse because there's an increased speed of degradation from heat. So another thing that can blow up in your face, and something that comes in just in time for your so-called Independence Day. Nobody calls it that anymore, apparently. It's the 4th of July. Who we've slaughtered with drones is your holiday weekend news dump, was the headline, which has happened right at Friday, when everyone's going off and getting planned to go off and have a good time celebrating their independence. Not their non-dependence, their independence, notwithstanding. The government, the unqualified one, Obama, the administration, dumps on the market how many people they've killed by drones. You're talking about things blowing up in your face. Now, first of all, I just want to call out that they're supposedly telling us they want to be transparent. Well, what they're transparent to is this report doesn't actually hit most of the areas that they're actually doing this in, first of all. Secondly, it's over many years, and the numbers are being said to be way underreported. Nonetheless, there's been over 100 non-combatant people killed by drone. And they don't care. So, that's in your name. Those people were not independent, even though they were not part of this country. They decided to be another country and didn't move. They wanted to live their own life, but the United States government believes it has the power in an extrajudicial sense to go make justice where they shall. And they were telling you right before Independence Day how independent you are. You're dependent on this whole system, and in your name they kill people with no good reason. And they call it the 4th of July now. It's like Turkey Day. You know, there's no historic event behind any of this. You're watching your society and culture and your history and custom and traditions slowly evaporate. And I'm kind of hearing crickets on that for sure. But it was kind of an interesting. I had to laugh because when I used to do video with a crew of guys, we had a really tight crew. We were very good quality people. We did high quality video production work. We were top-notch, award-winning type stuff. It was really kind of a neat time. I really enjoyed that. All volunteer. Nothing, again, most of my stuff is done volunteer. I learned that a long time ago somehow. Just money and gathering it, and that just, somehow it just rubbed me the wrong way early on. Not that I didn't have some, but at some time and had enough, and I try to do what I can and pinch my pennies to do what I need to do. But it wasn't a drive. It wasn't a motivation. No different than, even though I'm a miner, a gold miner as well, I'm not driven by the gold itself. I was actually driven by the private property aspect because of the separation. I've seen many claims. I looked at the gold they found and I said, you know what's more important to me is that map you have about where your claim is, and that inside the green area, which is national forest, there's a white area. That means that's private property. That excites me more than, that evidence right there excites me more than all the gold you can show me. And so I'm kind of wired a little odd that way, in a way. Not that I don't know the value that the gold has and all that, but it's just not a driver for me. So we got into this, so I'm volunteering video, and we're having a great, award-winning crew, a really great time, a great effort put together and get quality outcomes. But we used to do videos of what we call geezer ball. And geezer ball was literally a global softball championship that would show up periodically to where in the area that we were doing the video. And so we got to cover that. In fact, we were asked to cover it because we could cover it so well. Instant replays and everything, multiple instant replays, good announcers. We had good coverage, excellent camera operators, and all the whole thing. We were the bee's knees, I can say. Felt good about that. Wasn't just my opinion. But anyway, so we were wondering if we were to, because we're such a tight crew, why don't we saw a bunch of these old guys coming, maybe we could get together, and we were kind of getting a little older. This is a few years ago now, maybe 15 or so years. We were wondering about us entering into these softball games, because most of us had our background in softball. And we decided that if we did that, we would have a team, and we would call it Team Depends. Given it was a geezer ball and we were getting old too, we figured that's where we were going. We might as well go ahead and just admit into it, because that's just the way it works. Team Depends was going to be our softball team, our high fast pitch softball team that we were going to enter into. And then I saw this thing, your weekend news dump, Happy Independence Day, and I said no, because it's we're not actually celebrating any event like Thanksgiving anymore, or the actual Revolutionary War, what it actually meant and how we're going to keep that tradition alive. No, what we're doing is we're just exercising a day that this word independence was actually what they're going to get us to say, and what we should have right to do and we should be doing would be this day on the 4th. It's actually your Independence Dance Day. So for all of you old folks that sit around since 200 years reminiscing about the past, I hope you have your Dance Day card. Your Independence Dance Day card will get you entry to the floor, and you can go ahead and dance your heart away for that day, as the rest of society forgets. And you don't notice because you're so old, then your dementia's falling in, that you're the last memory that's gone and going. But enjoy your dance in your Depends. Enjoy your dance in your Depends. That's tomorrow, while the United States government slaughters people from drones, as I brought behind the woodshed, that's coming to a town near you as we move into autonomous killing by bureaucrat, execution by bureaucrat underneath a military engagement that most people are just wanting to be oblivious to. I say wanting to because the evidence is clearer and clearer that this is exactly what we are in, and it's going to be going to the technocratic condition. Everything's going to be inert. You'll play through your video games, commanding or not, or just directing through an automaton of some sort, a task. Because technocracy and our technology is just so good. And I've been talking about the fact that your cars on the road will take you someplace that is going to drive you there. You'll be taken to your work and back, and when one day somehow you had some fine you didn't pay or some allegation someone made, and they'll just drive you on over to the jail. So you can speak to the judge from inside the jail, which you all don't know has been going on. You don't probably, most people don't go to the courts anymore. It's not cost effective for the system, since they're going to keep you there anyway, and they're going to extort your signature to create an instrument that they're going to use against you and take and steal your money some more, calling it bail. It's a money laundering system. I talked to you about it. I said we've made the complaint. We'll see how that responds. See how this creature responds to these truths in law. The law's sitting there to expose it. But so we have automatons that are coming. These autonomous creatures called robots. We want to make them familiar to us as robots. Even they're just machines that are self-directed. And I said at some point you got to be careful that where's the safety cage for these things? It's not determined by you, like your phone. Your security is not determined by you. But here it is this week. Self-driving Tesla was involved in a fatal crash, the United States government says, and apparently one of these Tesla cars ran itself right underneath a left-turning semi-truck. Think about that. I was thinking about that, and I said, well, aren't they supposed to... What did I tell you before about you tell it to do something, and it parks itself, even if that means it drives itself underneath a semi? So I've already told you that they know about the problem of the car not seeing a semi, and nothing was done to make a warning, apparently, and these cars cannot see anything higher than their bumper. And so it doesn't see the semi, and it drives itself at a high speed underneath a semi, taking the top off the car. And the company says, well, the people who do this are supposed to know that they're supposed to have their hands on the steering wheel when they're doing this. It's just an assist. Okay, but now a man is dead. And apparently he was some Navy SEAL Delta 6, whatever the heck they want to call him. I don't know how these characters come on the scene. You're a big supporter for Tesla. But here was Tesla's answer. And this is what I want you to pay attention to, these decisions, these responses from these people and corporations that are making decisions about your life and getting you into systems that are a part of, you can't get rid of these things now. They're a part of everything you do. In other words, your iPhone, your computers will have key loggers. They have video and microphone logging. They have a battery pulse technology. They have batteries you can't turn off. They have chips that don't be disconnected. You can't get rid of this stuff. It does its own thing. The response by Tesla was a disappointment, actually. Like I said, I like the technology. It's cool, but not where we know. When we realize silent weapons for quiet wars is you being convinced that you have to put your place into an electronic circuit of society that they control. This is not cool. Here's their answer. Now the government's going to look at this. Apparently they've just stopped. I think they've just told 25,000 cars to not drive until they get this autopilot worked out, or that they can't use the autopilot till they look at it. But this is the Tesla's response. And I want you to think about this, because they talk about what this car has for sensors. And radar was the only thing they mentioned that could literally look out and touch something and see whether or not something was in front of it. But they said neither autopilot nor the driver noticed the white side of the tractor trailer against a brightly lit sky, so the brake was not applied. Folks, you want to explain to me what light colored has to do with radar? I'm a little bit shocked at this response. And why isn't the radar looking a little bit higher to see this view? What else is it not looking at? This is the system, the technocrats choosing for you your safety cage. And this is an ongoing experiment that's going on to find the minimal amount of technology they can get into something in order to cover the maximum amount of people, but not 100% of them. This is the crime, and I tell you, is license. You can do a crime as long as you stay under the regulations, which means that, like the Clean Water Act, it's not an act to clean water. It's an act to dirty water only so much and by this much. Neither the autopilot nor the driver noticed the white side of the tractor trailer. What does that have to do with radar? Why did they throw the driver's notice in here? How do we know what the driver noticed? Since we found out, I think he was watching a dang movie, he really wasn't paying too much attention either. So now we have the human failure involved that they're not going to get rid of, no matter how they do this. People will do what they do. There's a law against texting because people get in accidents and you know it happens all the time. Do I like the law against texting? No, it doesn't matter, but that's in commerce anyway. My point is that you're not going to outlaw being dumb. And apparently, the technocrats are not going to be as caring to look out for that. In other words, these cars, these machines, are being programmed to do this. And we're being programmed to accept it. And somebody dies, that's the extreme. What if it was just you just got a little bit of you got a scratch and a bump? Maybe it goes under the radar. It's like I tell you, the legal system. You know, we hear about all the nasty, the people the innocent men and women, mostly men in jail, and mostly black men in jail for crimes and murder on death row they never committed. How many, I've asked you, how many do you think that were misdemeanors that never ever got, innocent people that never ever got justice? How about the 160,000 people that got parking tickets, that the artificial intelligent computer was able to show failures of due process to those people that the government wasn't able to gain the $2.4 million, those 160,000 due process deficient paperworks would have given to them, that are being violating everybody that's not catching it. See, this whole system is being done to be agreeable to your sensibilities. So when you dislocate, you become one less nerve that gets rubbed raw. And so the rest of everybody doesn't think that they have the right either when they get rubbed raw, so they don't speak out. And when they do, there's a few of them, so they get beat down. This company has made a decision that they only needed one radar output that doesn't even recognize the turning of a semi, that they don't need any more, and it killed somebody. And what they've done here is that's going to be it's not okay, obviously. They send their condolences. And the United States government says, we're going to study this so that it doesn't happen again. The fact is that these pieces of equipment cannot be made with a safety cage enough to actually be adequate, that the government's going to give license to that part of the crime. And that's what you're going to be subject to, and you will be forced, because of your cricketness, to continue to use these things that they provide for you. How do I know that? It's not my view. It's all in the news. If you just look, your self-driving car will be programmed to kill you. Deal with it. Now, whatever the poetic license that's been given by this author to this article is, I'm not going to decide. But the truth screams through here. Your self-driving car will be programmed to kill you. This comes out of a study, a so-called study that was done, and they're calling it the social dilemma, that you give consumers a choice between some machine doing harm to the many versus the few. In this case, the one in the car, and then the secondary question, the one in the car is you. And the question is, do you have a machine that's programmed to take out 10 people in a crosswalk, pedestrians on the road, to save you, or do you have it save the 10 and kill you? That's your dilemma. And they're answering that dilemma. And I looked at that a little bit shocked, because I'm shocked again that they don't have another radar unit to look at semis, that are coming across. Why don't they know about this? Why did they know about it before? What else don't they see that some other life's going to be? It could be your life here coming up. And you think, oh, no, it's not. I'm just going to have a car. Well, folks, they're coming up with all kinds of stuff you don't know about in cars. That are just taking, you think your ABS brakes is you making braking? No, it's not you. It's breaking by wire, essentially. You put an input to what you want, and it figures out what it wants to do. So you're already living in a technocratic world and don't really know it, unless some of you know that stuff, but that's neither here nor there. It's that it's happening right around us. And for the most part, it works pretty well. I hope you're not the one where it doesn't. But so they wanted to find out, what would people accept? What notice can we give the people about this condition? You have a social dilemma. Your automatic car is going down the road and it's going to run into 10 people. How do we program it to hit those people, or to save you, or to save those people and kill you? What's your decision? Well, most people said they would have the car. When they're not in it, they would have the car save the 10 people and kill the rider. They weren't so much into that when they were in the car. And so the dilemma for the engineer. What do we do? How do we get people to get in a car that makes that decision to save the 10 people and kill the driver in the future? You know, any of you that's been thinking clearly realize that's not a study. That's not even relevant. That's not even a question. Why? It's because you're not dealing with men and women behind the wheel, which they balance the computer response of a car to. They say that because it's ironic that the people that would be in the seat driving the car would themselves, that they would not allow the machine to kill them to save the other 10. They wouldn't want to be in that car. But they themselves, ironically, it says, would avert and move themselves to a position to commit suicide, essentially, to save 10 people if they were the ones in control. This was another failure of this thought. If you're not, in my mind anyway, if you're not into how they do this, you're not realizing how they're conditioning us. When you're in a car, and I'm assuming it, I guess, through my perception, and I'm driving, let's say, essentially beyond what, folks? They're telling us, even in commerce, it's a basic speed rule. Drive the speed that's safe for the conditions and your expertise and all these kinds of things. Capability of the car. We're supposed to calculate that. That when we are exceeding that condition in ourselves, at least for me, I'm assuming that in my response to this, that I would know that. And if I'm doing it, if I'm proceeding underneath that rule, I probably won't be faced with this so-called dilemma. But let's say I've done it, you drive a little faster than you can, you've got to get someplace, you go absent-mindedly doing something, all of a sudden in the road there's something, and you realize you're violating this basic this reason, and that reason that you violated is not worth taking a life. Instinctually, more than likely, just instinctually, you will avoid doing any damage. Is a different decision than a computer deciding whether to take 10 people out, kill people in the street, or kill you, the passenger. Why? Because you're saying, I did something wrong, and it's not right that I kill anybody anyway, unless I'm a psychopath. I guess they're out there. And I'm going to try and avoid, and I'm going to take on the secondary risk and faith that this car and whatever I can do after I avoid won't kill me. I'm still in chaotic control, but I got my hand on the wheel, I can do something. Is a different condition than programming a computer to make the decision that if I've got 10 to kill or 1, I'm going to kill the 1. Why? It's because when you're doing it, you've made the decision to exceed the safety, and that's now on your conscience. You respond that way. The machine is a machine. It should never be operated outside a safety zone. Ever. And then it should be operated within a reasonable constraint below that, shouldn't it? That this question is really a false question. That they get us to start answering into. Everybody answered that question. They don't talk about the fact that they said, wait a minute, that's a wrong question. I don't want to be in a society that creates machines that operate with a safety, their safety screen is bigger than saving lives, or avoiding the operation that would cause the question. If I've got a car going down the road and it endangers 10 people, I've got a car traveling too fast for its ability to respond to that condition. That machine needs to be gone, done better or gone. That we get into these, my whole problem with this thing was they create a false sense of questions and a false sense of reality on a false premise. And then we're supposed to agree that's how this is going to be okay. And I go back to the top of the question, the headline, which just screams of this is arrogance. Your self-driving car will be programmed to kill you. Deal with it. That is the truth. It's limited liability, and it's your shared consequence for the society running a little bit smoother with a 10% overhead to death. This is our future world. Now, okay, what would we do about this? Well, we have the ability to write laws right now that would not allow autonomous machines to cause death and have strict liability. We have the ability to start thinking about this. Don't let the so-called ethicists, these are supposed to be done by ethicists, their condition was non-ethical that they set up. And it's perceived as if it is, like that they have this all-knowing, all well-rounded, omnipresent, omniscient knowledge that they could be have that level of integrity. We're giving it over to the expert at every turn. We're giving it over to the professional. And all that means is you're getting paid for doing something. And all the tests and licenses, if you look at them very carefully, are all merely agreements that you agree by the acceptance and the application to follow certain ethical guidelines. Look at every license. It's about how you will understand your limit of ethical action, what's deemed by statute to be an ethical action. We're talking about that here in the programming of cars that the ethicists prove by best science to be how the model will be made to make that decision, and everybody will lose the fact because of their authority that, wait a minute, we're not supposed to have machines that operate without a safety cage. These machines, except for the dumbest operator, are not supposed to hurt. And we have to really think more about that. This is what's going on around in technocracy. They will give themselves license to do, to balance, let's say, security for safety or privacy. They give themselves an argument, and you agree to it. And you agree to it when you don't say no. I am not going to allow you that. And we don't say that. And if we are saying it, we're not saying it enough and loud enough. And if and then that's where we get going to where you're just being wanton and willful in your disregard of our safety. So I'm saying it was all in the news here, the notice. Your cars will be programmed. They are killing people. In fact, some guy ripped off a Tesla S and drove it. It was, doing what a thief would do. They ran that thing so fast, about 100 miles an hour, and they ran it into a telephone pole. That killed him. Well, that's understandable. It wasn't the car's fault. That's just a thief running away, the car demolished, probably agreeably so. The Tesla is supposed to be a pretty crash-worthy car, so when it splits in half, that's a pretty dramatic crash, which killed its occupant. That's kind of understandable in that kind of a condition. But we're not talking about those kinds of stupidities. We're talking about people who are put in positions and with machines that are told that they are within some sort of ethical safety cage. And that ethics is a false premise. If they're allowing it to kill you, but we have drones that are on the end of a signal upon a soldier given by command of the unone to kill somebody. We have the list now that they do in fact kill people. Innocent non-combatants. Why do they reference you as a non-combatant? It's because you're in a global war. Don't miss that. I hope none of you missed that. I hope I didn't just say that. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's what that meant. It's like when they call you civilians, and it doesn't mean lawyer in this case. They talk to you from a military perspective. They call you a civilian. Why do they do that? Why do we accept that that's it? Even though The civil authority is supposed to be ruling the military. How did they do that? That they're in control of the civil? I've explained it all. You have to be in a war scenario. So they are agreeing that the ethicists are agreeing to have some measure of death go around these machines, that the safety cage around these autonomous machines are not going to be safe enough to ensure, except for the most stupidest interaction, not because of the performance or the operation of the machine, but because of some just stupid response to a machine, that they're willing to have machines kill us. It's not a leap between the acknowledgement that they do underneath direction by the military kill you by a drone, and then the car is going to be programmed to kill you. It's not a leap to find out that they're programming war machines to do this, and they're not going to have fighters with a mind in the seat. AI fighter pilot wins in combat situation. All in the same week about this stuff, folks. They're really ramping up the technocratic imposition in our lives. And believe me, I'm into it. I think it's just a wonderful thing. These machines really are cool, but not when they come to being used by a government that was actually supposed to protect you, but then comes and says they're going to give license to some measure of death from them. That's a facial, it should be a self-evident violation of its purpose. And I hear crickets. The AI known as Alpha used 4 virtual jets to successfully defend a coastline against 2 attacking aircraft and did not suffer any losses. Alpha, which was developed by a U.S. team, also triumphed in simulation against a retired human fighter pilot, the monkey pilot. One military aviation expert said the results were promising. So they have a computer, and I don't know what the inputs were to this pilot. I don't know how odd they were for him, the human that he was. And he fights in four aircraft, and they were balanced somehow between attack capabilities and weapon systems. And the AI jet was able to take out a man. I'll give him credit. The man flying a jet. And so they're promoting again this idea, but we already know that they're beyond wanting to kill us. They already know that they're going to let machines do that. This is your future, folks. There's not going to be any sympathy about this. That they have the models built that these things can happen, and there's probably a physiological point here as well, that the machines can do a lot more than are not limited by a man's constraint. And as I said, human and man and this monkey thing. Remember, there's Ballantyne's dictionary also said that the human is a monster. A monster. And what's more important to understand is the clarification on why it makes a monster is it's one without inheritable blood. And so you see the power of property. There's no way to inherit a property here. Why you're a monster. All right, so this should kind of give you the point of where we're at. You're a monster-in-law, not just a monkey. You're a human. You're a monster. You're one without the ability to receive property. And for those of you that understand what I've been talking about this property thing, that kind of should cause a shiver down your spine just a little bit. See, they don't care. They're not killing men and women. They're killing creatures. And they are given so that the creatures don't get all scared and skittish and go running off. They give themselves enough credit to kill a few, and then they give the creature a meaning for why someone else had to die, and that is good enough to keep the creature, the monster that can't inherit property, has no sense about it whatsoever, doesn't even know that he's being treated like property. It keeps them silent and quiet and controllable. But they have now proven an AI computer can outgun an aircraft in war machines now, utilizing its capacities to outfly other military men. And you're just looking at the technocracy, the war, the future war, the artificial intelligent warfare is on the horizon that you will just be the byproduct, collateral damage to. So who are the players in this? Same week, Same information coming out about all this at one time. AI warfare, artificial intelligence warfare is here. United States and Israel unveil autonomous killing machines. The two most aggressive military forces in the world have added a new frontier in the immense ability to deal death and destruction. In the same week, an Israeli firm launched the first ever torpedo from an unmanned sea vessel, while a U.S. artificial intelligence fighter pilot easily won combat simulations against human pilots. I'll stop there. Don't need to know. You can, again, the links are there to read. The blogcaster, I encourage you to read them. I don't want to diminish their importance of what they're telling you, and don't think I'm reading all of what I get to. In fact, I'm kind of upset sometimes. I miss certain points when I'm going through these that are really important to try and convey to you, and I just forget that they're there. There's so much to talk about. I don't have an easy way to highlight and maintain a highlight from opening and closing the browser from time to time. And so I don't have a way to highlight. I have to keep all this in my head while I'm building these connections. So there's more things in the blogcaster links that you'll find that explain more of how and the why and the what, the detail and the progression and the chronology of what's going on around us. And I think it's important. For those of you, what are we going to do about an AI? These people are going to go after it. They're getting all the black. You got all the black money. Now you got white money coming. Oh well, did I just do a microaggression? I guess I just did. On my own military execution here, aren't I? With all this politically correct nonsense. But that's another division. But here we are, being told that all this money is going to artificial intelligence war killing machines, and the two parties are United States and Israel. And then isn't it understandable how United States just gave the most money ever given in history to another country for its own defense? And so understand the dynamic where that's going, and that leads me to this next story by maybe an odd way. I'm talking military, but that's all has to do with money and the funding of wars and the funding of both sides and all that stuff that the so-called central banks might be doing. So hold on to the thought that we're talking about Israel. How do we get the Pax Americana to move into an Israeli-centric world? Isn't understood so easily. I'm still having some trouble seeing how does this thing go Zionist-centric, essentially. Zio West is the tool. It's going to move. How are they going to do it? Well, the thing I understand is what I've been telling you about how it's being done. We talked about Brexit. We talked about really it's a monetary union underneath. And that's the key for me to look at how do we move the seat of power, like we talk about the seat of power for finances in Brussels, or you might find it in Wall Street, or you find it in these entities. Watch how this works, and why there's so much money maybe going to Israel right now for its defense is because it becomes the literal seat of monetary and fiscal power of the world. In other words, it rules everyone through its monetary system, which is not hard. Why I've been trying to tell you, you need to get into silver and gold coin and be private to that. Stop this nonsense. But here's a report here. I was kind of leading on to with the Brexit and why it happened, why it wasn't what it seemed to be. I talked to you last week. I think I've been accurate on all that. I didn't hear anybody come back to give me too much, no resistance about what I was telling you. The extension of what's really going on. The more I've been looking, I've actually heard some people come after what I was telling you. They are saying very similar things as to what this Brexit thing's about, the monetary system, the Queen, the properties, the division of the EU, whether or not it stays or goes. We had the superstate definition. I said that's fine. That's just going to be the agreed community, if I can say it that way. But this whole thing is about a monetary policy, which the EU was started as. The EU was a monetary centralization construction, because they want to get centralized control of all the currencies of the world so they can control you. And then we know they're going to go to digital, which is you don't have that name of what do they say, the name or number of the beast. You don't have that digital number, and you don't have the beast's number. You don't understand it. You're going to wither away at least. But golden currency investors smell a central bank blood, where I was telling you that look at what happened. They made big hay over the pound falling. They made big hay over that was going to cause more military tensions, that the British was going to fall, that all this stuff, that the S&P 500 was falling. And then I pointed out they only fell to a certain spot and then stopped, and some came back, and then they do that thing, and this was really the speculators. Well, this comes out and says that even the people in the system understand that there's a disconnect now. And this may be changing some of the dynamics, but I will say don't believe it's going to change too far from the plan that's in place and moving in that direction to do pretty much, I think, what I said it was going to do. If not perfectly, it's going to be generally sufficient enough for you to understand you need to disconnect in some substantive way, and you need to be sure that you do not get into these digital monetary systems or the requirement for them. You're going to have to come in such mass and such organization, whether that's done quietly or openly. Probably quietly would be better. Just an understanding that you have a private way to get along. And the only thing I can figure out right now that we were told that it's in the weight and measure is how we keep ourselves true, and that is in what we've had for ourselves in the United States of America, and any place that has true money, a specie I should say, is in your silver and gold coins. So this was pointing to some of that. They're seeing a disconnect in the fiction system, the derivative system. The central banks were overboard with the latest round of stock market intervention. The recent increased movement of investment funds from fiat-based assets, in quotes, into gold and silver reflects the more widespread perception that central banks are trapped by a long series of bad policy decisions. But let me say, be careful of this gold-silver movement in assets with quotes, because that may have been electronic gold and silver, not actual tangible stuff. What I'm talking about is not even that bullion side. I'm saying start getting your trading with real silver coins. Don't wait. I mean, this is getting really close. That what I was telling you, I think, is really more the fact than what I've heard in lots of other places. And you're going to have to really find a way to separatize yourself without much fanfare. Just get it done. Going back to the report here, the obvious conclusion is the central banks are now forced to hyperinflate the money supply or face a total stock market collapse. Of course, hyperinflation of currencies will do nothing to stimulate real economic growth or fix the completely unmanageable global debt and derivatives problem. Well, see, if you're in that system, that legal with that fiat, you're attached and stuck to it. If you move over to production, you're not. Remember, I told you early on, market and farm-to-market stuff, all the raw material producers have highways, market highways to go to. They can still do what they need to do to make their livelihood. That's not commerce. What we're talking about here is this central banking commerce system. People are seeing that there's something up, and they're looking to go in other places. I am a feeling that this story is a notice, but it's not actually it's not giving you direction. But read on some more here. Perhaps the poster child examples of the damage done to the markets by radical central bank intervention and manipulation is Tesla, or TSLA. If not Amazon, Tesla, TSLA, is perhaps the greatest stock Ponzi scheme in the United States history. This is the car company now. This is Elon Musk. This is the guy doing all this technocratic stuff. This is the guy that the algorithm that they're working through, the ethicist, is willing to, they don't like it. Oh, they'll send their condolences that someone died, but there's still going to be a measure of death built into these systems. This is the same guy that's going to Mars. He's building spaceships. You know, that's all military. He's in tight with the government. I've wondered how these people come up with all this money. I've always wondered that. I don't know if I've said this before. Before YouTube was up, because of my video experience and public, and then being involved with public access, I said, wouldn't it be great, because I was just starting to see what the internet was. I was totally oblivious for a long time to it. Out in the middle, living out in the middle of nowhere does that to you. But I came around, I started to see it. I go, wouldn't that be great if we could have a public access, a global public access, and we could put our videos on. This was before YouTube. But I looked at that thing, and all I could see then was which trunk lines are you going to buy, and how much it was going to cost, and all the system, and where do you save all this stuff? And the technology was what it was. quite a few years ago, and I just couldn't see my way clear to taking the leap. I had no real resources to take the leap to become a repository for everybody's YouTubes. And now they call them YouTubes. I don't know what I was going to call mine. It was just an idea at the time. Well, now then, right out was like a couple years later, YouTube showed up, and I go, oh, someone's doing it. And then Google buys them. I said, how are these people doing this? And then we find that Google's actually tied in. They're tied into the system. They get their money from somewhere back, right, and they're all the same type of people. And so I started getting a clue then that the fix was in on that as well. So how has Tesla been able to do it? Fantastic ideas. I mean, really kind of neat stuff. I mean, he's a man after my own heart for doing that stuff. He's into that. I had my ideas when I was young too. You know, had things I wanted to do, had systems that still aren't online that could be done. Even till today, they still aren't doing it quite right. They're sneaking up on some of the ideas I have, but they're not there. And so you have these inspirations, these aspirations. But how do you fulfill them? Has always been a major question to me. I've never been a money guy. Well, maybe it's about your connections and to whom. So this report was also about that Tesla is doing the magnificent amount of money that they use. Where'd they get it all? Well, he's identifying this as a Ponzi scheme. And it makes more sense when you see how all these people are tied in with the government so much that's maybe not necessarily a Ponzi scheme other than the problem against the so-called taxpayer and the people of the United States and how all this nonsense, this leverage funding works behind the scenes. It's all black money as far as I can see. No, and that wasn't a microaggression. I mean, it's just what they call it. And so, this was the first indication that someone else was seeing that there's a problem, not for them, but for us. So it's a Ponzi scheme. It's really where they're getting the money behind the scenes. It's not supported at anything. It's all supported by the fiction. And it's given license by the government. Aside from being riddled with total accounting fraud, Tesla is technically insolvent and overloaded with debt that will eventually be impaled upon itself. It was reported today that the test driver of a Tesla self-driving car was killed when the car crashed into a tractor trailer at high speed. The test driver was watching a movie in the car. At least he didn't know what hit him. Tesla stock is freely trading. Tesla stock in a freely trading market would have been decimated today on that news, but today it's trading unchanged from yesterday's close. The only bigger tragedy than this fact is the death of someone who put their faith in Tesla. Now, okay, so on and on about this, but he talks about this creates the observation of what I've never understood. To me, it's always been disconnected. There was no supply and demand. That was something they fed us. The fix has been in, but this is like blood in the water now for people who are starting to look at this. And there's being now people making more indifferent decisions. That if this thing is set up like this, you really need to take a close look at what this military system is doing against us, giving license for using machines to kill us, utilizing this artificial intelligence, which we're told is going to be centered in Israel, to actually enforce the monetary system, which will move, let's say, from Brussels, the control and policy of which could be moved to, let's say, Jerusalem, literally within a short amount of time. I mean, whatever it took to move the offices, correct? And so you could see centralized monetary power in exactly what I was telling you about regarding why Brexit happened and who has to be separate and who's going to be controlled and what they're doing, the layering of the different types of currency so they have different styles of controls and abilities to control everybody's life by that control. You can see the shifting of power from the policemen of the world, the United States, to Israel, pretty simply here, through the central bank, so-called. Now, that someone is identifying the fixes in has not stopped anything anyway, has it? And so I don't see this as a big problem in its disclosure, and I don't think anybody's seeing that as a problem either. They're just moving. They're just moving now quickly, as we've been saying behind the woodshed they're doing, to the point. Now, what came out right after the last week's broadcast was the admission, so-called. To me, everyone made a big hoopla about it, and I guess it's a big, when you see it in writing, it's important. It said the new EU superstate plan by France and Germany was outed supposedly by Poland. And I don't know the truth of all this. It sounds like a big game to me, because for me, I told you, it was years and years and years ago they said this superstate was the EU. Why it was made, why Europe was a blanket was thrown over it, and they created the EU was a monetary state. that I told you last week was the case. Why you have to look at this in a monetary system. A few days later, they talk about the superstate, and the shift of power from France to Germany is giving you the idea that there's a shift of power afoot, and I don't know why it just doesn't keep going all the way to Israel here once they get this thing moving. Why I didn't see the news in understanding that there was a superstate plan, but it sure hit the alternative news, so-called, like it was new news. No, folks, it's been the plan. This has been the problem with the European Union all along. It has to do with this big data. It has to do with the centralization of monetary control outside of the constraints of what it has been into what they had planned way back when it would be. Now they're having to carve out who can do what within the higher upper echelons. I think that's what Brexit was with the Queen stuff. But that's just conjecture. I'll give that up. That's not tried and true. What I'm focused on is how are they going to shift power in this world to a place and have to protect it that literally brings on nuclear wars, literally brings on the death and destruction of lots and lots of people, just as they say they need to do in order to take a smaller place, have more control over lesser people. Another train of possibility here. Not because I believe it, because I've read about it. I've just said, okay, here it is. I'm really all of us are kind of out of the loop on reality, actually. And the little reality we can create locally to us is the only one I can see that's tangible. So to me, it's all, as I've told you before, possibilities and categories of possibilities and probabilities. But we've been told some things in the writings, in the black and white. They tell us all this stuff, and we haven't had up until recently, at least for myself. I tell you, I do it with my little magical decoder ring I developed for myself. It started to let me see things. Or those glasses that we find and we put on. All of a sudden we see the aliens amongst us. That was a very real thing in a tangible form when I went and I read the bill of 1953 that said that the Bar Association created legislation to take itself as a foreign occupier, make it domesticated, and supplant the permanent laws of the people. That was putting on the glasses and watching an alien come into your land and look like they were normal. That was what they live. That's literally what happens there. Okay, with a little bit of imagination. But in function, that's literally what happened. You had aliens actually looking like domestics, if I can say it that way, ruling you in control. The police state controlled by them. The police state was them. It was the military. This is what you're actually, these movies are actually documentaries. That cracks me up just to have that concept. No, this was not a movie. It was a documentary. The Matrix is not a movie. So big data comes into real for monetary systems. You want to keep tied into that thing or not try to pull yourself out. You're going to be sucked in. You're going to be required to do these things. And those of you that are not prepared, even if you are, folks, I've been telling you it's a long term. We just got the report. It may be a 10-year plan against you to keep food away from you. All you people that are prepping, are you going to be able to keep your food for 10 years? It's highly unlikely. So this is now some of us are, over 10 years we're going to be gone. It's okay, so we'll die hungry, I guess. But the point is that these people are laying out the plan. It's up to us to intercede, and where we do that is to try and cut ties or reduce our connections and or not even engage them. Massive leak and secret database used by world banks and spy agencies was another report. A confidential database used by the world's largest banks to help them judge who to take on as clients has been leaked online, the company's operator has confirmed. Okay, maybe just a story, but this is the capacity that they have. 2.2 million records about individuals and organizations. Well, if I just read that in a technical sense, individuals and organizations are these legal entities. Individuals are not you, men and women. They are an independent individual. Sole proprietorship is what they're doing. They're another business. But their individuals are an organization of a sole proprietorship. And so this is about their commerce side. And these categories range that they had listed where someone else had a categories that they put on whoever they were dealing with, in terrorism, to corruption, to organized crime. So this is the big data that's going on behind the scenes about this that's driving the monetary system. That will eventually trickle down to you and your digital accounts that you will do nothing without, apparently, unless we set up the alternative, which is already there for us. That's, I guess, the other point. That it's kind of exasperating a bit. We have that other system, and we are going to have to hold on to that for literally for dear life, because this system is coming. The database, the disclosure, even if this was a disclosure on the truth, but a false disclosure in the fact that it wasn't really given out. I didn't track it down to find the database. It gave a link. I don't really have the interest. It's still feeding into a plan. The plan is what I'm looking at. This feeds into that plan that they would have this capacity, and they already have this capacity, and here you are. The proof of that, if you want to continue to go down the artificial intelligent, fictional legal entity world they have made for you and plug yourself in, expect the 10% death rate, I can tell you that, if not more, because they want more of you gone, so they can get down these little monetary system fiefdom that appears that it's going to be moving over to Israel. In the monetary system, it's already there in the people who are Zionists. Their mentality is focused there already, if it's not actually literally there. Remember, we speak in these things in multidimensionally. It doesn't have to be a physical placement either in this fictional world. It could be an ideology that's going to control this monetary system that is Zionist-centric. I could say it better that way. And so these players are already on the board, folks. They've been on the board. We're just now coming to the fact that this little report here tells us that it's already in the banking system, that they're already characterizing or mischaracterizing you, or can, if you've agreed to play that system. And most of us have. I don't know that I am, but I mean, I'll just say us, just generally. And so as long as you do, you see there's people that are going to have decisions over your life that you don't even know. And that decision kicks on back over to what database is being used to these drones that they now agree that they kill non-combatants. Folks, you're a non-combatant. You think one day you're going to maybe not see the hellfire that came in and wonder what all the light and smoke was about? Because some database somewhere was handed to someone who had the decision, a bureaucrat, to push the cherry red button that had a hellfire with your name on it. This is what we're talking about. The danger is when they have the right to come into your house and get information and just fabricate whatever they want. You don't have to be wanting to do. You have no intention here at all. You just have to be a thorn in their side. How many stories do we have to hear before we start realizing the crickets get smashed? You're a cricket when you're blamed and don't respond with it. They don't let you know about that, so you're not going to respond. You're dead. You're harmed. You're treated. You're deemed. No input, no due process, and we are crickets against that. Why, actually, I think that was a pretty cool idea. It just come to me. Why haven't we put that you have to have a notice before a citation to qualify? Because there's this altered reality, a reality, not a fiction, but a reality of the use of the highway. Why don't we have that initial notice to respond that we weren't in a regulated activity, but were the beneficiary of a grant? This is almost to me, that I'm now kind of lost in that a little bit. I'm going to have to get to the broadcast and then start thinking about this after post-production, about maybe that might be helping us in another direction to actually bring forth this condition. Where's the real due process? It's being stripped from us. There's nothing that's not ours. I've told you before, everything you do on the internet's public. It's like public domain. It's accessible to everyone. Nothing is private. Nothing. I told you my little experience with programming HTML web pages. You change the standard paragraph, the very first line, to say private, and there's a subroutine that'll change it back. Move your line down a few lines into the meta section, and it'll change it back to a public document. It took someone to know that was going to happen, folks. All I can tell you, they knew this was coming, and they knew nothing on the internet was private. That we now, again, another thing coming on. Home computers connected to the internet aren't private court rules. Home computers connected to the internet aren't private court rules. Now, my mind was going, okay, so what's all the exceptions to that, even though I'm having to buy into the fact they have the right to say that. But this is a fact, and this is how they're treating it. I mean, my mind went, okay, so you have a server that's connected to the internet, but it transfers its information and doesn't keep any. What about the second computer that's not connected to the internet? as soon as that case comes on, they're going to say, well, that was just a derivative connection. The point is you're subjected to this stuff. There's nothing in law that actually allows it, but a so-called judge said so. The subjective expectation of privacy, of an objectively reasonable expectation of privacy in his personal computer, does not exist. Now, it seems reasonable, the judge says, it seems unreasonable to think that a computer connected to the web is immune from invasion. Indeed, the opposite holds true. In today's digital world, it appears to be a virtual certainty. This is supposed to be in law and certain, right? Virtual certainty that computers accessing the internet can and eventually will be hacked. His reason behind this is because they were not immune from being hacked. You don't have a privacy right. I want you to apply that to your house. Because you may not be able to keep someone from busting in your front door means you do not have a right of privacy in your house now. Now, my extension of that means that the government that has the right to drive a tank through your front yard and into your front door, if you don't have the power to stop that, then you have no right to privacy. What have I just defined? I've defined Mad Max world. I've just defined dog eat dog. You have the rights you can defend against, period. You ain't big enough, you don't have a right. Is that a constitutional world of limited government, folks? Folks, wake up. Shake, shake, wake up. The reasoning, and this could be appealed, I don't know. The reasoning is because you can't keep an invader from invading. You don't have a right to privacy. It means you have no right to possession. Exclusive. What happened to that, folks? These people are not in this reality. They're in the one they're forcing on you. I want you to understand the law. This is reflexive opinion adapting to this new reality that they're imposing, which is extrajudicial. If you cannot prove that you are immune from a hack, which means that they can't prove any evidence that they got in on you, you don't have a right to privacy in a computer as extended to your house. Means if you can't keep someone from busting in your window and climbing in the window, you have no expectation of privacy. I'm going to repeat it one more time. So when the big and bad government with their SWAT tank come flying into your front door because you couldn't stop them, and you'd be shot if you tried, you have no expectation of privacy in this logic. To show you how far gonzo this thing has become, and because you are crickets. Well, they don't talk about your house here, but add it, extend it, folks. This is where it's going. You live in Mad Max world. This is lawless land. There is no borders, folks. I keep telling you the importance of borders. Not the wall you build, the importance of having jurisdictional purity. This one decision is telegraphing to you, whether or not it stands, it's telegraphing to you there are people in seats of decision that mean you harm, that mean to destroy the natural, if I can say it, the natural distinctions in different peoples and traditions and customs. Notwithstanding the melting pot in the United States, it still has its own and unique and demonstrably unique set of laws regarding property and its protection that decision undermines. And who done it? But a bar association member. By what method? The method that doesn't recognize property. It has a term. It's called sustainable development. It's an international imposition by a foreigner, domesticated by us. I wouldn't even say argue, but I'll say argue for your sense, arguably by lawful law. What it was the supplantation, the unlawful and international war crime, supplantation of your laws, local laws, for a model business corporation act. It's the unionization of your states into a federal, through a federal veneer of authority by private association. Going back over to the EU to tie that back in. The European countries were separate and distinct, had their own rules. European Union, Europe was distinctive nations. The European Union wanted to meld those together and make a European monetary community. This is proven again now. Juncker to force all the remaining EU countries to adopt the euro after Brexit paves the way for a single monetary union. They're stripping all the property rights because you can't stop them. And I told you last week that the euro was the thing they needed, as the states can be separate now once they do it. Well, this story confirmed what I told you. As conjectural as it might have sounded, I was saying it based on some things I've known for 20 years and reading. But the EU countries are going to be forced to adopt the euro. Should be plenty of reason why Brexit was right. Notwithstanding that, I told you the people are going to have to take Brexit by the horns, and they are going to have to drive what Brexit intended for their good, not the good of the needs of the global financial system. But it was right in the news here this week, what I said last week. They need the euro. They need it as a surrogate to control. And now they're going to force it on anybody that's not still in. Should have been enough notice that we should have seen people bailing, but they're not. See, they're not connected to what's going on. I want you to be connected to what's going on, because this is what they're doing in the United States of America. It's already really, in large part, been done. It can be undone, but we're not aware. It's what I talk about here. How it's been done and how we can intercede to stop it. European superstate to be unveiled, the EU nations to be morphed into one post-Brexit. So I'm trying to show you that these internal laws by the bar, these judges making these things to strip your privacy, is stripping your borders. It's stripping the border to your house. It's stripping the border from the outside world to your house, inside your castle, so-called. It strips your right of access. It strips down everything and puts it into an international opinion reflective of what it needs for the purpose of the shared good. This was evidence after I told you this was coming to be. This was the plan. This is not news that the giant superstate. This is not news that you're not going to have rights. There is no borders, that we're extrajudicial. This is the plan. Don't be persuaded beyond that. Don't think this is all of a sudden a new thing. You're just coming to speed on this. We all are. It's about the control of this monetary system. They're telling us that there's not going to be any way to stop them because you are not able to stop them. That's the definition now. You have no rights unless you can stop them. What did I say a long time ago? The reason why China and Russia are stopping the United States is because they are big enough to do so. And that's all. Every other country that can't is suffering underneath this global imposition. And you know, like in Libya, Gaddafi was going to go after his own coin. He had water. He developed their infrastructure for natural resources. He's developing the land. And they bombed that into oblivion, didn't they? They can't have you living self-reliant, whether that be a nation or you by yourself. So the predictions start to roll out as well. What I'm using to tell you, folks, you need to really start getting positioned a lot better, and it better be a lot longer term. For those of us that are as old as we is, maybe not. Well, we're going to see the end of what austerity is, but the youngins are really susceptible to this more, and they really, really, really have to be thinking in a time, in a space, in a mind, in a maturity that they may not even have. And I say that without judgment. I had no maturity to understand this as well. It's taken all these years just to. I mean, it all starts with a violative act. I mean, I had to see that violative act because I wasn't smart enough to otherwise. They had to really literally slap figuratively the rose-colored glasses from my face. I was sitting in la-la land thinking everything was copacetic, and it's not. It hasn't been. A former Federal Reserve chairman warns of imminent crisis, urges return to gold standard. What did I say, folks? I said they will make your monetary currencies nationalized. You'll get into nationalism. They'll actually entice you and induce you to make the gold standard back, and you'll pick it up, but you won't realize it's the diminished capacity, subject to conditions, the legal conditions. Right, within days, folks, they're telling you this. That they're going to go to, they're urging, there's an imminent crisis. They're predicting this, folks. This is a plan. The fix is in. I'm telling you, be careful when it comes into a gold standard. Just go get the gold coin and the silver coin and forget the new standard. It's going to have a financial and monetary construct that it constrains it. Literally go back to the land. I don't know how else to say about this. Deal with people in a face-to-face construct with the use of the laws that say that you have the right to do so. Don't extend yourself into commerce. They talk in consumers for a reason. And so I'm offering these, maybe not solutions. I don't think there's solutions. It's just us doing what we need to do, really, in all the different ways that we might generate to do it in order to keep a standard of living that we want, to keep a way of life that we want, notwithstanding our melting pot status in the United States, but by our property laws. It doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter what you call yourself. You are equal before the law by your property that you can say is and given to me to be protected. That includes you. Don't forget about that. They did give you a name. You have a name and you have a territory. Maybe you should start adopting the mining law to understand how that works. Oh, but you got the birth certificate. Oh, quit a whiner. Quit being a victim. Stop acknowledging that it exists. Make them produce it for you. Oh, there's an answer, isn't there? After Brexit, can we exit a few things too, says Ron Paul. My continuing problem with Ron Paul. He asks a question. Why didn't he provide the way you do that? Say, yeah, we're going to exit a few things. Here's how we do it. Don't ask the question. Brexit now gives the people subjects to the Queen a vote, a popular vote, that even the majority rule is beating down on the others, and that gives us the example that people in the United States are non-dependent and we can freely act? That he asks a question on what we could do because they done it? As I intimated, well, if Brexit, if British did it, what about Germany and France and Austria and all these other places? The Portugal? What about, we get our example from subjects of a queen? Are you kidding me? And he asked the question, can we? Well, of course, folks, and we ought to have been. Why doesn't Ron Paul lead that way? Another prediction. Even though we have the right to go and make our own law instead of allowing the attorneys to do it for the future they want, we should be doing to counter what they're doing at this point while we work to educate ourselves and them that they're felons and committing treason. You're getting predictions of your future. This is going to be what they're talking about with the increase, the inflation that's right around the corner, predicted. This is all just news to us. It may not happen, but I'm suggesting to you it doesn't matter. They are in control. You better be pretty flexible at some point because they're going to be bending you over which way and not if you're not, and you will be subjected to have to agree where you're not prepared, wherever they decide to hit. That it's being also predicted that the social unrest will be here and cause a projected model price increase of 395% food price spikes. They're predicating this model on the fact that you'll fight your neighbor, folks. We have to embrace each other, care enough about each other despite our differences, and say, listen, we can't let this become a social unrest. We can't let this divide happen to us. It's being fostered, encouraged, it's being promoted and fed, and we are, as a people, are going to buy into it, and all those guns you Second Amendment people think are so powerful against the government, you're going to use to protect your food. For how long is my other question. And then if you can protect 100% of it, for how long when they put social unrest on your life under a plausible sense of reasonability for 10 years? They're predicting this. They're telling you we are in control. They're giving you the notice that if you don't want to be controlled, you have to have the tactic, the strategy, and the wherewithal to counter anything that they bring against you. It's on the horizon, whatever that is. I don't have a crystal ball. I just read what they tell me is happening. I see. I'm just literally hours in telling you what's going to happen to have it confirmed in the next week's notice here anymore. I'm so beyond on the tabs and getting to things. It's like I'm feeling like I'm running a foot race. I'm almost feeling like I better just pull off the road for a bit and take a stand and rethink what I'm telling you folks. Maybe this is not a good thing. I keep having that what do I tell y'all? It's not even that I'm telling you it over and over. Yeah, the same things keep coming up, but it's actually different things, different nuances that are happening. Another way to address it, and we're not. We're the crickets. Elites called to arms. You want to see how nuts these people are? Elites called to arms. It's time to rise up against the ignorant masses. It's time for the elites to rise up against the ignorant masses, says one well-read author. If you don't think these people that are in control, these so-called elites, these people that think they are, aren't nuts. Talk about extremism that doesn't find the air and explain it correctly. What I found fascinating, this guy fabricates a political party, the Republican Party, and he violates the premise of it in his discussion. It's not hard to imagine the Republican Party in the United States and perhaps the British conservatives, should Brexit go terribly wrong, losing control of angry, nationalistic rank and file and reconstituting themselves as the kind of Main Street pro-business parties they were a generation ago before their ideological zeal led them into a blind alley. Folks, we're all being led into a blind alley by these divisions. By not seeing that the Republican Party is actually no different than the Democratic Party. It's just their decision. The only difference they have is which direction, from which end of the candle are they going to burn you. You're the candle. Which end, which direction do they want to burn the nation? He fabricates a party and its construction and its effect, tying in a bunch of things, and he's the one calling for the destruction of the ignorant masses. My problem is there is ignorant masses, and they are going to be destroyed because they're going to be crickets. And they're going to be crickets because we had the obligation to not be crickets. This guy goes on to say that you need to be eliminated. That's the plan, folks. I don't even know. This is not even this guy's nuts, but I mean, it's not that they're not psychopaths in the world that are not getting their way. He ties together this thing. Republican Party is already rife with science deniers and economic reality deniers, has thrown itself into the embrace of a man who fabricates realities that ignorant people like to inhabit. And I said, this guy's got to be, that's what he's doing. He's throwing all this stuff to ignorant people that they reside and get excited about, and that's our problem. He himself is the purveyor of the problem that he blames us for. And you're going to die for it. You're going to be eliminated. And it's because you didn't bring your voice to say he didn't have the right. That's really all I'm asking. Have people step up for themselves and say, you, whoever that who you is, you don't have that right. You don't have that power. And then I'm suggesting to you, you better have your alternate reality that is substantial, that sits on the land, that has a reality that can't be denied, and show how the fiction is nothing but a shadow. And these people start to go away. This guy is a nutcase. You can read the story. I don't even want to get behind it all. But, I mean, it's just on and on what they will do to us, and we allow them to do to us. And the plan continues. Even though the evidence, as I've been pointing out these last 2 hours, is right there on what it is they're going to do, how they're going to do it, that they're doing it, that it's being fulfilled, and that we're not responding. It's time that we do something and not more than just, talk about it. Like I said, you keep talking about the history of this stuff, or you can realize the history has run us down, and they're using that against us, where they're beating us in the head like a baby seal with it. It's time to take that bludgeon away and start looking into the future of where they're leading us, so we don't get dragged off in over the cliff. That's up to us, each one of us. Thank you for tuning in today. Hope something I said helped you out. You can apply it, you work it over, chew on it, ruminate on it, as they say. Thank you very much to Grimner, reallibertymedia.com, to allow me the space to put the blogcaster and the archives and everything you do there, Grimner, and UCY.tv, Jules, for the simulcast, and freedomsnetwork.com, and Bo Diddy and Grimner put together social network. Maybe you want to join up, and you can hear it's a bunch of, a lot of dorks are there, I understand, and any of the terrestrial broadcasters, I do appreciate that you do that. And anybody else, markonthebeastshow.com, got a donation or a suggestion for me, and maybe look around, pass the podcast around, maybe look for other places that we can get the word out, and hopefully we'll get more input on maybe the directions we can take. You take care. I'll be here next week. Tech diffs and nature willing. Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
So that's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.
Truth on the Tracks you can catch every Monday night and Friday night at 9.